Okay, we're going to review congruent triangles. And just to refresh your memory, there were several ways to prove triangles are congruent. We've got side, 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 angle, side, angle, angle, side, and hypotenuse, leg. Am I forgetting any? I think I got them all. 5? Yeah. The one that doesn't work is side, side, angle. This is called the ambiguous case, and that doesn't work. How do we remember that that's not the one that works? It spells a bad word when you write it backwards. So watch out for that and do not fall for that trick. Okay, so what we're going to do today is run through some examples of basically proofs, but we're not going to do the whole proof. We just want to talk you through and remind you how to mark your diagrams, what to look for so that you can identify if triangles are congruent or not. And also, just a reminder that congruent triangles, all the sides are congruent. All the sides are the same length. All the angles are equal. So don't get those confused with similar triangles. Congruent triangles are exactly the same, but they might be, they might be rotated from one another, but they should be exactly the same. Okay, so this statement says PQ is congruent to ST. So I'm going to mark those as congruent. It says QR is congruent to TR. So I'm going to mark those. And it says R is the midpoint of PS. Okay, so if a point is the midpoint of a line segment, that means it cuts it into two congruent parts. So these two triangles would be congruent by side, side, side. Okay, let's look at this next one. Let's change colors because I'm getting bored of purple. Let's go with green. Okay, it says JL is congruent to NM, so let's mark those. K is the midpoint of JN. K is the midpoint of JN. So that means JK and KN are congruent. It says K is the midpoint of LM also. So that means K cuts this one into two equal parts too. Whoops, I'm supposed to have 3 marks there. So again, we have side, side, side. These triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Okay, let's look at this one. AC is congruent to AD. CB is congruent to DB, so we mark those. And if you remember what I told you, when triangles are sharing a side, go ahead and mark that too, because it makes it easier to see the congruence in what you're working with here. So here, this is another example of side, side, side. JM is congruent to LN. Angle, so watch out for your symbols here. That's angle JMN. So you trace those letters, JMN. So that would be this angle. Is congruent to LNM. That's this angle. And we're supposed to prove these are congruent triangles. Well, these two triangles are sharing a side, so I would mark that side as congruent to itself. So what we have here is side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. So that's how those two are congruent. Given AB is congruent to CB, and BD bisects angle ABC. So angle ABC is this angle right here, and it says segment BD bisects that. So what that means is that cuts it into two congruent triangles. Delete that. Cuts it into two congruent angles. So this little guy here, this little guy here, are congruent angles. All right, bisected the angle ABC. And then again, we have them sharing a side here. So this would be side, angle, side, side, angle, side. This one, given AB is congruent to CB, we mark those. Oh, this is the same one as last time. Doo-be-doo-boo-doo-doo-doo. We can erase that. Go on to the next one. It says V is the midpoint of WZ. V is the midpoint of WZ. So that means these two segments are congruent. And XY. So these two segments are congruent. Prove that these triangles are congruent. Okay, well, we got something else here that we need to consider, and that is some vertical angles. Now, if you remember, anytime you have two line segments crossing each other, they make congruent angles called vertical angles. So in this green example here, these two angles are congruent, but so are these two angles. So when we have this kind of crisscross action here, we've got congruent angles right here. So then what we're looking at is side, angle, side, side, angle, side congruence. Okay, AB is congruent to ED. AB is parallel to DE. So I would mark this with that little arrow just to remind myself that those are parallel. C is the midpoint of AE. So that means C breaks AE up into two congruent segments. And we're supposed to prove those triangles are congruent. Okay, so with the parallel lines, that gives us some information that we could use. I'm going to just erase my previous markings because I should have made these diagrams bigger, but I didn't. Okay, so A, B, and ED are parallel. So we've got some zigzag action going on here with these parallel lines. What that means is we can look for alternate interior angles that are congruent. And these are alternate interior angles. And then from the previous statements, we know that A, B, and ED are congruent. And that C is a midpoint, which makes these sides congruent. So you can see here we've got side, angle, side. Okay, let's try these out. It says, determine whether the triangles are congruent by side, 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 or side, angle, side. If not congruent, write not congruent. If congruent, write a congruency statement. So a congruency statement is just one of these things where you state which triangles are congruent, and you have to write the letters in a certain order. For example, the angle at A should equal D, B should equal E, C should equal F. Segment AB should equal DE, BC should equal EF, AC should equal DF. So the order matters in how you write those statements, so you have to be careful. Okay, looking at number 4, I see a side that they are sharing. So I'm just going to mark it. Now I look at these two triangles, and I see that they are congruent by side, side, side. So when I write the congruency statement, P, R, Q is congruent to, I've got to match it up with the parts that would be the same. So P, S, Q would be the order of letters I want in the second one. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. I see some vertical angles here and here. We don't have any other information, so what I'm seeing here is the side-side angle situation, and we cannot prove that those are congruent. Number 6, they're sharing a side again, so I mark that. What we have here is side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. So we would say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DCB. Okay, in this last one, I see some parallel lines. I'm going to emphasize these parallel lines here. So with parallel lines, we might have corresponding angles congruent. We might have alternate interior angles congruent. But what I'm seeing is I'm seeing corresponding angles. If you look here and here, because we have this transversal and parallel lines, and those would be corresponding angles. So I'm going to erase all of this because it gets messy. Change the color. Okay. So anyway, we know that those are corresponding angles and they're congruent. And so we have side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So triangle JKL would be congruent to, we have to be careful here. We got to notice which sides are congruent. It's actually going to be JK and LM would be the same. So this is going to be LMN. Now you might have your, depending on how you write your first triangle, what order the letters go in, you might have different answers for the second part. That's fine, just to make sure they match up, okay? And then one more, we've got JK is parallel to LM. So we can make those little parallel marks. And then JL is parallel to KM. Prove that JKL is congruent to MLK. So we've got some alternate interior angles to work with. This one and this one. You know what, let me get rid of those marks here. Let's try this again. These are parallel, this one and this one. This one and this one. And then alternate interior angles, we've got this angle and this angle. And we've got a side connecting them that would be congruent to itself. And we've got another set of parallel lines giving us these angles are congruent with another zigzag going on here. So this one would be angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle. All right, try the exercises, and then I'll give you a quiz either tonight or tomorrow, and go from there. So you'll get a point for doing the assignment and another point for the quiz if you score high enough. So it's a good opportunity to raise your grade.